Dawnbreaker is one of the returning dungeons we'll be facing in Season 3 of The War Within. The dungeon starts with a 30-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that time frame, you will upgrade your key. Before boarding the Dawnbreaker, players will face a pack of mobs including a Nightfall Ritualist, Shadow Mage, and Curseblade. Ritualists have an uninterruptible channel in Tormenting Ray. If targeted, players should use a defensive cooldown as this deals a lot of damage. Healers will also need to be aware of the Stygian Seed cast as this also deals a large amount of shadow damage to a target and needs to be dispelled. Be wary as upon expiration this will explode for large damage and knock other players back. Shadow Mages will spam cast Nightbolt on random players, so any spare kick should go into this ability to stop avoidable damage going out. They will also instantly debuff a player with Ensnaring Shadows, reducing that player's movement speed by 50% while taking heavy shadow damage, so if you do have a Curse Dispel you can remove this debuff, but if not, make sure to commit a defensive. And finally, tanks will have to be wary of the Curseblade's melee attacks. Upon boarding the Dawnbreaker, there is one new mob that you need to be aware of, the Nightfall Commander. Their tank buster, Tainted Slash, deals massive upfront damage and also applies a bleed, so make sure to mitigate this with a defensive. They will also cast Abyssal Howl, which places an absorb shield on all nearby enemies and increases all damage by 10% while the shield holds. This cannot be kicked anymore, so just be quick to burst through it. Once you've cleared the main deck, fly to the nearby smaller ships and place explosive barrels in order to spawn the first boss of the dungeon, Speaker Shadowcrown. These smaller ships will have the previous Nightfall mobs we've mentioned, but they will also be joined by a Sareki Web Mage. Be sure to kick as many web bolts as possible as these deal a decent amount of damage to random players, and if you're targeted with Bursting Cocoon, move away from allies and use a defensive as this deals splash damage when it explodes. After you've placed explosive barrels on both ships, head back to the Dawnbreaker to face the first boss of the dungeon, Speaker Shadowcrown. Throughout the fight the boss will cast Shadow Bolt, dealing moderate damage to the tank, so try and kick this where possible. Shadowcrown will also cast Obsidian Beam. This deals significant upfront damage to the tank and a smaller amount to all players, but more importantly, for 7 seconds after, the boss radiates 3 rotating beams of shadow damage that will kill anyone caught in their path. Outside of this, healers must be prepared to dispel Burning Shadows. This deals nasty shadow damage to the targeted player over time, and upon removal will apply Shadow Shroud to the other 4 players. This debuff deals ticking damage to the player until the healing absorb is healed through, so use self-healing defensives if you can, and healers deplete these absorbs. She will then also cast Collapsing Night. This spawns a Shadow Rift under 2 players that everyone will need to immediately move out from, and tanks will need to be aware of the rifts and position the boss away from them, ready for her next Obsidian Beam cast. Finally, upon reaching 50 and 0% health, the boss will cast Darkness Comes. This will make the boss completely invulnerable as she covers the whole ship in a massive void which will one-shot any players caught in it. During this mechanic, you'll want to Dragon Ride away from the ship to avoid being killed, but make sure to fly through a light orb around the ship to protect yourself from encroaching shadows. Once the cast finishes, you can safely return to the ship, and in this phase there will be an extra Obsidian Beam, so be ready. After defeating Shadowcrown, use Dragon Riding to fly down into the city of Merodar, and now we must seek out 3 mini-bosses in order to weaken the second boss of the dungeon, Anub'ikkaj. There's no set route here, but for the sake of this guide, we'll head to the church and fight some new mobs before facing the first mini-boss, Ixkratin the Unbreakable. Nightfall Shadow Walkers are buffed with Shadow Blades, which causes their melees to inflict additional shadow damage, while also applying a stacking healing reduction debuff to the tank. Tanks be wary when fighting these mobs and cope with crowd control when you need to drop stacks. Manifested Shadows cast Black Hail. This pelts the area with dark swirlies that deal large amounts of shadow damage, so be sure to move out of these swirlies. And you'll also want to be prepared to use a defensive for their Abyssal Rot. This deals moderate upfront damage, followed by a nasty dot. Nightfall Darkcasters will cast Tormenting Beam. This now deals very large amounts of shadow damage over time to a player, so this must be kicked. You should also aim to stop or CC their Umbral Barrier cast, as this places a large shield on them that converts to health if it's not removed. The final mob in this area before the mini-bosses are Nightfall Tacticians. They will be a problem for your tank with their melees, but they also cast a Black Edge Frontal that deals fatal damage and slows players, so be sure to move out of this at all costs. Now we can take on the mini-bosses. Pay close attention to the abilities that they use, as you'll see them again on the next boss. All mini-bosses will cast Abyssal Blast. This deals upfront shadow damage and leaves a nasty dot on players that they need to use a defensive for. Ixkratin's unique ability is Terrifying Slam. This blasts the tank with massive physical and shadow damage and knocks them backward, while also fearing and dealing damage to anyone caught in the large circle around them. Tanks be sure to use a defensive whilst positioning for the knockback, and other players should move out of this circle. Death Screamer Ikentak's unique ability is Dark Orb. If you get targeted with Dark Orb, be sure to aim it in a way that allows it to travel as far as possible, as the further it travels, the less damage it deals. You want to commit a defensive here with scary overlaps like the Abyssal Blast. Ascendant Viscoxrius has a unique cast in Shadow Decay. Be ready to press defensives here as it deals massive shadow damage every second to the group. After all mini bosses have been defeated, we can head over to Anub'ikkaj, and I'd recommend tanking the boss on this pathway here as positioning is crucial for some of his abilities. As I mentioned, the abilities for this boss were shown on the previous mini bosses, however I will go over them again here. Terrifying Slam blasts a tank with massive physical and shadow damage and knocks them backwards. It will also fear and deal huge damage to anyone caught in the large circle around them, so tanks be sure to use the defensive while also positioning for the knockback, and all other players should move out of the circle. Once again, if targeted by Dark Orb, be sure to aim it in a way that allows it to travel as far as possible, as the further it travels, the less damage it deals. But also, avoid being hit by the orb itself, as it will apply dark scares to anyone it comes into contact with, dealing massive amounts of shadow damage over time. And then you'll want to use defensives on Shadowy Decay, as this deals huge group-wide damage. Anub'ikkaj does, however, have one new ability that we haven't seen before. Animate Shadow spawns a bunch of slimes that tanks should gather onto the boss so that players can cleave them down, and they will cast Congealed Darkness, which deals a pretty significant amount of damage to a random player, so be sure to use kicks and AoE stops on the slimes as you cleave them. Now that Anub'ikkaj has fallen, we can head back to the Dawnbreaker to fight the final boss. However, there is a Nightfall Dark Architect waiting for us on board. If targeted with a Tormenting Eruption, use a defensive and spread from allies, as this deals lethal shadow damage over time to 2 different players, which splashes in a 5-yard radius. The Architect will also spawn random adds with Usher reinforcements, so be sure to kill these before the boss spawns. Pick the Shadow Mages and Darkcasters in, and tanks be wary of the other mobs. The final boss of this dungeon is Rasha'nan. This is a 2-phase boss that phases at 65% HP, and the boss has a colossal amount of HP, so self-damage is not the priority here in this first phase. Instead, you'll want to pick up and throw the Arathi bombs that spawn that will deal around 5% of her HP, so be sure to prioritize these, as they will also deal lethal group-wide damage if not thrown at the boss. Simply walk over and click on them, and then run to the boss and use your extra action button. Throughout the fight, you'll want to dodge the Expel Webs frontal, as this deals massive nature damage and roots you in place, meaning that you can't help with the bombs. If targeted with Rolling Acid, position yourself so that you don't hit your party with the wave that comes out as shown here, and then make sure to use personal defensives and healing cooldowns for Erosive Spray. This deals large party-wide damage and also sends out 3 stacks of Lingering Erosion that deals stacking nature damage over time. When the boss reaches 65%, she will fly to another area, so mount up on your dragon riding mount and follow her, but be sure to collect light fragments that are scattered in the air to extend your radiant light buff, or you will die to the encroaching shadows debuff. When you've landed, you must interrupt Acidic Eruption, as she's immune to damage while channeling this, but this ability also deals ramping nature damage over time. Now that you've entered phase 2, the boss will randomly target 2 members with Spinneret strands, so if you're targeted, move out of the group and drop the pools of Sticky Web to the side. These strands will also try and pull you back in, so if possible, save a movement ability to get out quickly, as the webs on the floor deal substantial damage. The Rolling Acid mechanic that we dealt with earlier will then be used to clear these webs, so the target should make sure to aim the wave at them while avoiding players. You will, however, want to try not to leave these pools in melee, as if the tank has to move out, the boss casts Tacky Burst, dealing massive amounts of group damage that will most likely wipe you. Once again, use defensives and healing cooldowns for Erosive Spray, place Rolling Acid on the correct side, and whittle the boss's health down to 60% HP as she flies away at this point. But that's it for this boss, and that wraps up Dawnbreaker for Mythic Plus in Season 3. If you're interested in my nameplates, they are from my free Plates profile, which can be found inside my Discord. The link will be in the description. And if this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.